came out of the car, and Abe said, Rebbe, I lost my job. And the Rebbe said to him, you're my coach.
Groups of teenagers would come to visit on New York tour. And they would come and I used to arrange that they should be able to come minute with the Rebbe.
That's a cool one.
So during one of these groups, as the Rebbe was walking out of the Shmeder downstairs to the steps, Abe was staying there. So the Rebbe called him over and said to him, go coach them. And he says, whoa, what? The Rebbe pointed to the kids. And he should go over and speak to the kids.
I just put on the video, feel free to talk, I just,
Was davening Ma'ariv, and
studying this.
something was wrong, like he had a problem, whatever, so he was davening for that say, and he was crying. The binyan finished, and the last Kaddish of the Rabbanu was said. The Rebbe picked up his siddur, ready to go out, and this guy is davening. He's crying, he doesn't see anything, the Rebbe picked up the siddur and stood there. I looked at my watch. Why? I don't know. I just looked at my watch. The Rebbe stood there for 7 minutes until he went Oysa Shalom, and then left. Stood there, watching him, while he was finishing to daven. The Rebbe stood there with the siddur in his hand, ready after the Kaddish. 7 minutes, then turned around, kissed him to the mouth. And he never knew what happened. I told him afterwards.
So this was Harlan Willis Carter's coach who came close to the Rebbe. He was like a very interesting character there. Well,
After he passed, the Rebbe wanted to make sure that there would be a proper Leviat, a proper Tara, and everything else, and offered to pay for the expenses of that. He decided to make a film amount for people who couldn't afford, that we would lend a certain amount of money, and the Rebbe gave a $100 bill to the Gemach, and I would settle there. The Rebbe read what his staff was that the Gemach was saying, Avram all the Shalom says. He used to write to the Rebbe very often about his feelings and what he was going through. In spite of whatever he's going through, copy quotes, you couldn't know. Anybody who saw him at the pavilion would think that life was peaches and cream. Everything was beautiful for him.
Look at this guy.
Nicht nur das Gott nicht angewiesen in Mai sein in der Simcha schon mit. Die Teva welche die Simcha von Kol Masecho und Kol Dochecho, weil Adela bis da sein, Kiyitzen und Elim in Acheshe. Die Schaas meistens soll es stehen haben nach Simcha, die Zeh das Emes verleihen, das ist das Simcha mit.
I just put on a video before. I figured we watched one about marijuana last week, so I was like, oh, we'll put on a video this week. That is a really interesting guy. I was always quite fascinated with him because they mentioned in the video, he didn't speak a word of Yiddish. And the Rebbe would speak for hours in Yiddish. And he was the Harlem Globetrotters coach, and then he, I don't know, quit, fired, I don't know exactly his life story, but he was like quite a fixture there, and he was very kind of vulnerable to the Rebbe. And when people were very vulnerable to the Rebbe would often offer a lot of guidance to them, because that was when, Anyways, we just got a couple more minutes before we start. So any questions, comments? Anyone need anything? All right, that's good. You guys understand everything. Yeah, Ed?
There's one thing that I liked here. The Rebbe said, we must always look for ways to widen the communication channel with God. How do you widen that channel? And I thought,
So is that one of the letters there, or here? Or?
That was in the reading.
So I think generally speaking, the Rebbe felt, and whenever we say the Rebbe, it's usually the Torah, Judaism, ancient tradition, and the Rebbe is pretty much solely following that. You always have to look for opportunities to bring things to God, to find God in your life.
Yeah.
So not have, a lot of times people have kind of multiple sides to themselves. It's always important to know wherever you go, you're there to connect to God and to transcend the world and build a deep relationship. So, there always have been people. believe it or not, I mean, in the Rebbe, when the Rebbe became Rebbe in America, it was super popular at that time for Jews to act very Jewish in synagogue. And then like outside you couldn't tell at all. And that was the first time in Jewish history, 1,000 years history, 4,000-year history, that it was like that, And the reason was Jewish people in the old country, they always had to live in ghettos, and they always had to live in, and here they come to America, they're like totally respected. And the Rebbe was always teaching, saying, no, the main place you need to be Jewish isn't the synagogue. That's where you get the energy to transform the world. It's almost like you have to go to the synagogue to remind yourself you're Jewish, to disconnect from other external distractions, and then after you get it, then you can go back to work and you say, hey, I'm a Jew, and you can extend that. So I think that's likely the context of it. David Chase, I'm not sure if we mentioned him in this class here, but he was Chase Banks. Chase Banks, what did we mention him about? I don't remember. Anyways, he one time wrote a letter to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe asked him, he said, would you do a favor for me? He said, sure. So he was a huge philanthropist. The Rebbe said, well, you put tefillin on every day. So he started doing it every day, and then he went on a boat, and he started praying a little bit more. Now, one of the prayers we do, we always face Jerusalem, which is usually east, right? So he's on this boat, and he's on his own yacht, and he goes to the captain, and he says, do you know which way is east? In the middle of the ocean, sea. He says, yeah, that way. Why do you need to know? He says, well, I need to pray. And the guy said, why do you need to pray? He said, well, I speak to God every day. You believe in God? Yeah, of course I believe in God. He said, well, I don't believe in. And they had this whole conversation, and the captain was very, very kind of affected by him. He kind of said, hey, that's a good idea. I should pray also. So he had just written to the Rebbe, and even though he was a big philanthropist, very famous, the Rebbe notably, would respond to all sorts of different letters, but the Rebbe was so excited that this Jew who had started wearing tefillin and started praying had gone to his yacht, to his captain, and he said, that's where you need to find Judaism, and holiness is wherever you go. And if you have it, and if you know it, you got to take it somewhere. You got to share it with somebody. A lot of people don't know, but most of Judaism is done in your home. Most of the mitzvahs are done in your home. Most of Judaism is in your home. And what happened in the, late 1800s, early 1900s, till today, is people started saying, like, oh, I'll go to the synagogue, I'll go to the temple, I'll go be a Jew. But really, it was never like that before. The temple, the synagogue, the study was so you could figure out what to do at home, figure out what to do with your family, figure out what life was about. And once you figured out what life was about, then you can perform it. But people started kind of making like, oh yeah, well, I go to synagogue on Yom Kippur and I'll be a Jew. I'm a good Jew today, And you'll see a lot of the themes here are kind of the same idea. Finding purpose and Judaism and holiness and spirituality wherever you go. In addition, as you'll see, an underlying theme that the Rebbe says a lot is that it's not only like, hey, you have to seek spirituality. Actually, this is what you were created for. This is actually the purpose that's programmed into you. So you got to get to it. So anyways, we're going to start today. This is going to be an interesting class. Let's see. Healthy at heart. So this is a class today on emotional and mental health. Very interesting class, very interesting subject. It's actually a subject which is close to my heart, besides the fact that so much of the world, everybody in some sense or another, in this last 20, 30 years, is dealing with emotional, mental wellness. If they're not, then they might just be totally unaware of it and in denial, or they might be indeed very healthy, but they for sure have a friend or a relative who is suffering and is struggling. It's not a secret. Suicide rates are up. It's a big subject. It's an important subject. I'll put certain disclaimers. The Rebbe's opinion on things, and okay, so I'll just, I've been living in Prescott for about 9 years. When I moved here, there were over 100 and there were almost 130 rehabilitation centers here.
Wow.
When I moved here. And now there's a lot less. But, you know, I've always been aware of the Rebbe's opinions on emotional wellness and mental health. And it took me a lot of time to integrate it and to see it in people. You'll see a lot of times what we do is we hear an idea and we like automatically associate it with something else, might be in pop culture, something else we know. And we totally miss the idea because we aren't able to absorb the context. So we're going to say some interesting kind of radical ideas today, which might be radical to some people. And it might sound counterintuitive to a lot of modern psychology. I want to say that over the years, short term, I was kind of like, hey, how does this make sense? When I first moved to Prescott, and I was kind of, you know, every Friday night we had 10 to 20 people from different places who were suffering from different addictions. And then it took time, and over several years, to kind of see the long term of it, the long term of their recovery, and the long term of, frankly, you know, all these things are not only if someone is, so to speak, quote unquote, a mental case, these are all important. We all have emotions, we all have a mind, and we all deal with these things at a certain level, and I think they're really important cues. Again, if you want, you know, to talk about it more, I would love to talk about it. I can't pack in my experiences and the insight that I feel I have today in an hour and a half. We're going to more go through the text, but we're going to open the subject, and it's a really good and a really important subject. And you know, it was interesting. There were a lot of different rabbis in different places. Some rabbis are, you know, actually suffering from different issues, and we were discussing these subjects, and it's quite fascinating. So just to start, there was a rabbi who was a philosopher in the beginning of the modern state of Israel. His name was Rabbi Alexander Ben Nun. And he was someone who built a lot of the educational system in Israel. He was religious, so a lot of it wasn't accepted, but he started working on the religious educational system in Israel. And he was a philosopher, and he put together kind of 10 rules how to run education. 10, like the 10 commandments. And he wrote it to the Rebbe, and he sent it to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe basically wrote back, he said, you forgot the 11th principle. And the Rebbe wrote, he said, the 11th principle is, there's no absolute principles in education. So when we deal with subjects like this, it's not chemistry. Every case is different, and just like educating children, every child is different. Every rule is different. We had the subject last week. Sometimes the doctor, whether you like him or not, he might be the emissary to bring the recovery. You know, you still got to go to doctors, and sometimes doctors might even make a mistake by accident, and then somehow that heals the patient, right? That happens also. So, you know, I want to say, as always, you know, before you take it and apply it, or let's study the subjects and try and get the idea here, the general idea. So, now, even amongst the Rebbe's letters, there are so many different responses to different people with all sorts of different issues. Many, many responses. And I think when they made this course, they were a little bit hesitant to put a course on this because there's so much variations. You have to really study the specifics of each case study. And that's difficult to do, especially when we usually don't have the letter that the person wrote to the Rebbe, right? We only have the Rebbe's response. However, they said, you know, what we could do is we could kind of get the all-inclusive advice. Let's get the general direction where we need to head, and then every person, you know, can expand and work out the details. There are dozens of letters, and a lot of the things I'm going to say today, I can kind of show you advice where the Rebbe said almost something which seems like it's the opposite for another specific case. But today we'll address kind of some of the big angles where the Rebbe wrote to a lot of people. So I'm going to start with a question. So the Rebbe's guidance follows a recurring angle that also applies to emotional wellness. I'm going to start with a question. I'm just curious what people feel emotional wellness means. Anyone have what do you feel? What does it mean to you? I know that's like a loaded question. Balanced?
Mind, body, and spirit.
Mind, body, and spirit, you mean like kind of unified? All right, anyone else have anything else?
Resilience, ability to bounce back.
Ability to bounce back. Feeling of peace. Anyone else?
Acceptance.
Acceptance. I'm not, this is a totally subjective question. So yeah,
A growing feeling of gratitude.
being in a state of gratitude. Yeah, I think these are all important things. I could tell you, I know some people who say a feeling of nirvana. Some people saying a feeling where I don't want to kill myself. There's a lot of degrees on the spectrum. But I just wanted to keep that question in the back of your mind, because it's important to remember, when you study this, a lot of times we associate different ideas with the common culture. And we sometimes miss the point of what the Rebbe is saying, because we realize the Rebbe is actually coming from a whole broader angle. So let's start. So I wanted to start right away, and we'll just take the bomb out. The common theme is, and this is very common nowadays, when someone has an issue, what you do is you first need to gain awareness of the issue. And then you go deeper and deeper into awareness of the issue to understand it, where it comes from. It might be something that happened when you were a child, it might be something in general, it might be PTSD, it might be from war, it might be, right? That's generally the theme of a lot of therapy. The Rebbe has a very interesting approach, which we'll talk about today, with using the power of the mind to actually focus on something totally different. Focus on something totally different.
I'm a big believer in that.
Well, we'll see. We're going to study it, and I want to just say, like,
And what's an addiction?
I could talk about it also in addiction. I don't want to get off track. There's an advantage in both sides. Sides. A lot of times it depends what stage someone's in. It depends on a lot of different things. But this is something that you find the Rebbe writes a lot about. Not focusing on the problem, focusing on something else, and there's really a lot more to it. So I want to just say, like, as we go through, I'll point out little nuances. Now, another thing, so when you do focus on the issue, in Judaism we believe half the recovery is knowing the sickness, right? If you're not aware of the sickness, it could be very difficult to heal, right? If you don't know, many people have gone to doctors, and we watched someone last week when doctors, and they said he had muscle pain, and he went to the Rebbe, right? It's very common that doctors can't diagnose something. Very common that people might see someone having an easy time with something that they just can't get their act together at all, right? So there is an equality, and actually we do find the Rebbe sometimes helping people talk about their history. Very common with Holocaust survivors. The Rebbe said you need to talk about it and you need to go through it. And but generally speaking, the Rebbe's general gist, and we're going to cover today, was life is healthy. Life comes from God, and it's healthy. The world is healthy. And when you are going with the momentum of the world, and you're connecting with people, and you're doing good things, you're connecting to that healthiness, and the problem becomes smaller, versus kind of detaching from everything. And sometimes what we might end up doing is people might end up really getting absorbed in the problem, really getting absorbed in it, and going through it, and everything, and really seeing everything in the world. I mean, it's very common when people are in the beginning of kind of coming out of denial of a problem mentally. A lot of times they'll look around and they'll start identifying the problem in everybody, right?
Yeah,
And it
sure.
becomes this is the problem of the world. Children were abused. This is the problem of the world. And someone might come and say, hey, how are you doing? You must have been abused as a child. And this is sometimes what happens. So the Rebbe was generally the opinion that you got to connect to things, you got to grow in the world, you got to be, you have to invest in being active, in doing good things, and doing productive things, and that makes the problem smaller. Now, before we talk about it more, because some people might have some questions on that, we're going to go and do a couple of case studies today, and each of these case studies will be able to kind of bring out a nuance to understand this better. The class is going to actually have kind of three parts. One of the parts is we're going to go through some of these case studies and see the Rebbe's actual advice. The second part, we're actually going to understand why that's the Rebbe's advice. Or in other words, where's the Rebbe coming from, which I think is equally important to know why the Rebbe is saying this. And then the third part you'll see is kind of an interesting twist. So we're going to go through, and we'll start right now. We'll start with Stan right here. Text 1A, page 92. Any questions so far? So again, if these things didn't seem counter to you, please let's just hold out and we can discuss it. And but let's just see what the Rebbe says first. Page 92, text 1A.
Dismissing thoughts. With regard to the thought which you expressed in your letter, I believe I've already written to you before, and there are many problems and states of mind which are best dealt with by dismissing them from the mind completely, at any rate for a period of time. It is then possible to return to those problems with a fresh mind and in a more objective state, so as to evaluate the problem in their true perspective and reality. And it is then easier to find the proper solution. In the vast majority of such cases, the individual himself can decide how long this period of dismissal from attention should be, judging by the degree of objectivity which he can attain as time goes on.
So here, this is the first part of the letter. I mean, this is kind of the bombshell of the Rebbe's opinion. So the Rebbe says when there's an elephant in the room, you basically don't focus on it. Well, how do you do that? It's very difficult. There's an elephant in the room. It's rather difficult, the Rebbe says, but when you do that, you are able to lose the emotional charge and reapproach the problem, right? So sometimes there might be a problem in your life which seems like huge, and you can't stop thinking about it, right? And then one day, it's the Super Bowl Sunday, and you're like, oh my gosh, I love the Kansas City Chiefs, nobody here does. And then you say, you know, you forgot about it. And someone says, hey, don't you have that issue? And you're like, don't worry about it. It doesn't bother me today. Well, that is precisely when you might actually be able to advance in that. Because when you're dealing in the struggle, when you're emotionally charged in the struggle, it's very, very hard. Now, the problem is, as we all know, when we say don't think about the Super Bowl, what are we all going to think about? The Super Bowl. So here's key, and I'm going to interject as we go through some of my own experiences in this and on different angles because I think it's important. But stage number one, the Rebbe says it's difficult, but you have to not think about it. Now, how do you not think about something? Anyone have a suggestion? Yeah.
I say to myself, I'm gonna make a decision not to make a decision. And it works.
Make a decision not to make a decision. Well, that's helpful.
That's good.
Mark, I heard you say something. Think about something else.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is which is similar to making a decision probably to think about something else.
Something pleasant.
So let's go in. So now the Rebbe is going to go in, and we're going to read. And we have a psychologist here, so I'd love to talk. And if you have any comments or anything like that, I would love to talk about it because this happens to be a subject which is super important nowadays, and it's something that I've kind of been chewing on for probably since I was a teenager. So yeah, let's go on. Needless to say. Oh yeah, reach out. Go for it. Yeah, go for it. You read the title. Go for it.
Needless to say, also, that it is not an easy thing to dismiss a problem from the mind, especially a matter that involves one's own self. This would be almost impossible unless one can engage one's thought and attention in a completely unrelated subject. A man's thinking process is constantly in a state of flux and has a tendency, consciously or subconsciously, to revert to the subject matter which one wishes to dismiss from the mind. Therefore, when resolving to dismiss the matter from one's mind, it is necessary immediately to find some other subject unrelated to the first in which to engage one's attention.
So this is really key. There's a theory called IPT, ironic process theory, which means that when you try to stop thinking about something, you think about it more, right? So the Rebbe says you can't stop thinking about something, you have to think about something else, something unrelated. Now go on.
Another point, which is also almost universally true, is that it's not easy for the person involved to find a proper subject in which to engage one's mind. But here it is possible to receive help from friends who would know you and your psychological makeup. Undoubtedly, you have such friends within reach.
So this is, it's not always easy to think about another subject. Because a lot of times what happens is your mind keeps reminding you of what you're trying to avoid. So you actually have to kind of be deeply involved in something else. It has to be deeply involved. If you can imagine your brain, your brain has to be like a large percentage of your concentration has to be thinking about that other thing. Because if not, then you'll just revert back. Or a lot of times what people do is they will find the same struggle in whatever they're thinking about, right? They'll find the same struggle whatever they're thinking, or they'll try and think of other things that might teach them in a backwards way how to help their situation. So here the Rebbe says another point is maybe even ask a friend to think about something which is irrelevant to what you're doing. Now in some context the Rebbe, we'll talk about the subject in the Hebrew words. There's actually a term in Hebrew for this. And I remember I was once talking with Ed about it, and I was talking about this subject, and I said, I was once reading that a lot of people have difficulty with changing the subject. And I read this article, and it was actually by a psychologist, it was a rabbi, and he said it's because people don't know stuff anymore. Used to be people knew stuff. So it'd be like, let me think about something else I know. Now everyone just keeps their phone around, and we have access to everything, right? So I said it used to be like people would memorize tremendous amounts of Torah. So it'd be like, oh, let's get into the subject if this is kosher or not. So Ed, I remember he told me that his dad memorized a lot of poetry. And his dad, like people nowadays, they'd be like, oh yeah, I found the poem. I Googled it, and it's right here, right? Now another thing that I want to point out here is if you realize, the Rebbe does not say to avoid the problem. He doesn't say to cover over the problem with another subject. He doesn't say don't go there. He says, you can go back, as Mark always says, make an appointment when it's not as charged. Because while it's charged, it's just going to be a battle. Okay, so now we're going to go, that's point number 2, rechanneling, dismissive thoughts, so we've got to rechannel it. And now we're going to see, so again, it has to be entirely outside the subject. Now some of us have things, that we can just jump into right away, oh my gosh, did you see how I fixed that car and whatever it is, I don't know. Some people, they'll be like, oh, I love Sudoku, just take out the Sudoku and now I'm like totally gone from the world, right? But this can sometimes be challenging because a lot of times we shoot ourselves in the leg and the mind is like trying to be like, let's say if someone's thinking obsessively about something, the mind is trying to kind of remind you or maybe, the mind works in funny ways. So that's why the Rebbe suggests maybe ask a friend who knows you to think about something to help you discover a subject which is totally irrelevant and totally not charged at all. Okay, now we're going to go to now we don't know who this letter is written to, but we can see he obviously kept thinking about how he was a bad person. And we can see that here, and we're going to see what the Rebbe says to him about that.
Ending self-recrimination. Generally, there is the teaching of our sages that nothing stands in the way of repentance for the past and commitment for the future. Here too, the principle enunciated above may be applied, namely, that although it is necessary to end the transgression immediately, whether it is a sin of commission or omission, it is often necessary to end immediately any self-recrimination or brooding in regards to the sins of the past. One of the obvious reasons for this is that brooding over past failures is bound to be depressing and discouraging and would undermine one's confidence in the future, even one's confidence in the efficacy of teshuva and repentance. Therefore, it is advisable to dismiss such thoughts for a time being, and leave them for more propitious times. May Hashem grant that you should have good news to report in regard to all the above.
So this is also important. There's a few points here. Number one, the Rebbe says there's a concept in Judaism called teshuvah. You can erase your past. If you feel like you can't erase your past, you're simply wrong. You can be a perfectly good person. You can be. Number two, you have to grow and do good things. And number three, if you have confidence in teshuvah, don't think about how you're a bad person at this time, because it's gonna deter you from becoming a good person and being involved in good things. So start doing good things right away and forget about that. Put that on the side. Actually, in that letter, the Rebbe puts a notion to the Tanya. Tanya is a book of Hasidic philosophy. I have a class every Wednesday on. We actually studied this last year, where it says that a lot of times you'll be doing like something random. You'll be doing your taxes, and you'll be like, oh my gosh, I did such a bad thing, I'm such a bad person. And the Tanya says, wait, what does that have to do with taxes, right? And, well, I guess it could, but what does it have to do with taxes, right? And then, so Alter Rebbe was the first Chabad Rebbe, he says, put it away. Put it away, it has nothing to do with what you're doing now. And set a time, next Tuesday, 6 p.m., I'm going to think about my past. And again, nowadays, the Rebbe often told people, he said, nowadays people are very weak mentally compared to the way it used to be. And the Rebbe would tell people, like, just move on and show that it doesn't matter, you're doing good from now on. But this is what the Rebbe is telling. So just to summarize, in order to shut off undesirable thoughts, you have to engage your mind in something else. Number two, past regrets. Judaism believes in teshuvah. We do have second chances. Sometimes we see someone who does something bad and we don't want them to have a second chance, or we don't think they do. But God does. And that's an important thing. That's what he tells them. Number two, one's actual behavior has to change for good if you want to repent. You gotta start doing good things. And number three, don't think about the past too much. Because the only purpose of thinking about the past in the Jewish context is only to enhance the future. So many people, the Rebbe would say, like, if you're like thinking about how you did something wrong, and it even feels righteous, right? Because you're like being all honest with yourself. You always have to ask yourself, is it helping me do more good or not? If it's helping you do more good, then you're somewhat on the right track. But if it's not, which it's usually not, then you just have to not think, you have to change the subject. Okay, so let's go on. This is our first case study, and now we'll go into another one. We'll start with a very interesting video. So invest energy in the present life. Any questions so far? No? Okay.
My grandmother, Taiba Lipsker, was a very, very special and holy woman. Like many of our grandmothers, she did not enjoy a serene and easy, smooth life. Growing up in Bolshevik, communist Russia as a Jew was difficult. Raising a family in Georgia during the 1930s under Stalin's tyranny was far from simple. Then came the war. They escaped the former Soviet Union on false papers, came to the displaced persons camps, the DP camps. Again, life was anything but serene, raising a large family, sometimes in one-bedroom flat. My grandparents made it in 1947 to the United States of America. They settled on a farm in New Jersey. That too didn't turn out so successful, and they relocated to Brooklyn, New York. My grandparents raised 9 beautiful, amazing children and a 10th orphan. Making a livelihood proved very complicated, and the upheavals of her life took their toll on her. She suffered from anxiety, from depression, from melancholy. And one day my grandmother consulted the Lubavitcher Rebbe what to do about her internal psychological and emotional state. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe gave her fascinating advice. He suggested to her that she go to as many Jewish weddings as possible and to dance away at these weddings and inspire other people to dance. As it happens to be, my grandmother was an exceptionally skilled dancer. She embraced the Rebbe's advice, and for decades, she would go to every possible wedding and dance away. Family, friends, relatives, community members, and sometimes complete strangers. Everybody knew Mrs. Lipsker is here. She is the life of the wedding and the life of the party. This was not part of her nature. This was quite contrary to her nature, but she did it, and she did it with every fiber of her being. She lived in Crown Heights in Brooklyn. There were many Bali Tshuva, young women and men who returned to Judaism, and they had small families attending the wedding, or sometimes no families. And my grandmother would come in, and she brought so much joy and vigor and stamina and inspiration to the wedding. She would dance away sometimes for hours with the bride and with the mothers and with the siblings and with the families and with the relatives. And indeed, the joy that she brought to hundreds and thousands of people over long decades, it came back to her. It gave her so much joy and strength and fortitude and resilience and inspiration. Besides the fact, exercising a few times a week for a few hours a night, dancing with all your might is also very effective for anxiety.
So that's, in Brooklyn, in Crown Heights, the neighborhood that I come from, there's basically a wedding every night. I mean, it's a larger community, and weddings are a lot cheaper in New York because they have like package deals. I got married in New York, my wife's from New York, but there's basically a wedding every night. Now, in that, I just want to point out, there's a few key things which the Rebbe spoke of. I mean, October 7th this year was on Simchas Torah, and we had to dance, you know? Now, the Rebbe would always say that joy is one of the only things that follows action. If you act like you're happy, if you dance, it actually will arouse emotions, even when it's very, very difficult. So you can imagine this lady who suffered miserably. Probably a lot of nights she was like, no, I'm not dancing. You know, or like, dance, I'm not happy, I'm not happy. But knowing that this was what she was told by the Rebbe, she would go every night, and she'd probably walk home joyous every night. So that's just something which I think is in that video. So we could see there that when she danced, actually, it probably took her mind off of whatever she was having a hard time with. And it was probably like, I mean, there were probably sometimes she's like, oh, I don't want to do this, you know, Jewish mother, you know, I'm not doing it. But then she would go, and it would make her more upbeat. The next video we're going to watch is actually very interesting. So this is the Rebbe advised a woman struggling with anxiety to dance as many weddings as possible. Here that would be difficult, but there, you know, there's one almost every night. Okay, sometimes two. So the next story is actually very interesting. The next story is very interesting. Let me see, here it is. There's an organization called Aleph. Aleph is an organization you may have heard of. It's a Jewish organization for inmates and soldiers. And it basically was started, the Rebbe spoke at a Farbrengen once, and he said, you know, the prison system in America is not a good prison system. It takes tons of people, doesn't rehabilitate them, just has them there, just more and more people. And we need to start rehabilitating and start giving a positive effect on them. So one of the things that the Rebbe, I mean, they do a lot of advocacy, but one of the things that the Rebbe pushed for is there should be an organization where Jewish inmates study Torah, they learn the prayers, they learn the mitzvahs. That's actually interesting because, I mean, I always tell people, I remember I was once on the subway in New York. Now, Crown Heights, New York has tons of visitors and tons of tourists. In fact, it got rated one of the highest Airbnb tourist spots. That community of the Rebbe. They have tours and restaurants and everything like that. When you go to New York, you gotta go there. Anyways, I was once a yeshiva student in New York, and maybe I was married already. I went on the subway, and there were a bunch of Amish people on the subway. I said, where are you guys from? I said, Lancaster, New York. I said, oh, I've been there before. Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I said, oh, I was in Lancaster, New York, and I was there. He said, really? What were you doing there? I said, oh, I was in prison. So actually, there's like a really high security prison there. And I went there for Purim one year to read the Megillah for inmates. So I was like, oh, I was in prison. Like I was like, you know, went there as a rabbi. But Aleph does tremendous things. I myself, a lot of times I'll meet a Jewish guy in Prescott, and I'll do a prayer with him. I'm like, how do you know that? He's like, oh, I was in jail, you know, I was in prison, and they reached out to me. Many times I've gone to, one time I went to Verde Valley facility over there, and I went on a Sunday, and they took me right into the cell of a certain inmate. And the officer said, I have never seen anyone get permission to do what you got to do on a Sunday. It's like Sunday we don't allow visitors. Who who do you have connections? I said, well, there's this organization, Aleph. I don't know, I just called the rabbi there, and they know people, and they make sure every inmate can have kosher and everything like that. So over the years, they helped a lot of people. It's a fascinating organization. They also help soldiers. There was someone in town that said, my daughter's in Afghanistan, and I wish she could get like matzah or something. I was like, oh, no problem. Just give me her name. And they got it to her daughter, and she said, I can't locate where my daughter is. I can't even speak to her, but somehow they could get everything to her. So anyways, so this is an individual who passed by the Rebbe through Aleph.
Rabbi,
Yes.
can you turn the sound down? Just a
Sure.
smidge? Nobody.
I was in prison, and this rabbi here and also here dealing with you, help me answer.
Brother Marcus, you'll soon forget about all this past.
I did.
And Machi the same, you know what Pastor is?
Yes.
The Jews have forgotten about Mitzrayim. It is time for you to forget about your prison also. And Brother Marcus bless you, even if it's difficult, but try your best. Brother Marcus bless you.
Thank you.
So I've seen that video before. I always thought it's kind of like a high emotional video. You have a guy who just came out of prison. Now, of course, not everyone gives the advice to the Rebbe. People are coming to the Rebbe for advice, right? And they're coming to receive from him. But here the Rebbe tells him, he says, don't focus so much on the prison. And the Rebbe felt that for a lot of people in that situation, they have to go and know that they're regular citizens now. They're regular, positive, good people. They shouldn't think they're bad people because they overthink prison. And the Rebbe actually brings the reference to leaving Egypt. And we know that in the Bible, one of the biggest problems of the Jews in the desert was the slave mentality. They kept looking back to Egypt. And Moses keeps saying, look forward to Sinai, look forward to Israel. You gotta know you're a new people. Egypt should, you don't want Egypt to affect you anymore. And that was the Rebbe's view as well.
Isn't that why they kept them in the desert for 40 years?
Partially. I don't want to go into that so much. But anyway, so the Rebbe advised the former prisoner inmate to disengage in the past in order to heal from it. Any questions, anything? All right, let's go on. We're going to go to our next case study. All right, number 4.
So am I reading 2A?
Yes.
Okay. The jealous sister. The reasons for your younger...
So let me just give you a little context what's known about this letter. The lady wrote that one of her daughters is having a lot of issues, and she's going to therapy and everything like that, but it seems more grave and it seems like something seriously wrong with her. That is the context of what we know about what was written to the Rebbe. So,
The reasons for your younger daughter's condition are not at all complicated. The causes seem to lie in the fact that your daughter is subconsciously jealous of her older sister, and such a feeling manifests itself by a desire not to be interested in those activities where the person is unable to compete successfully. Therefore, your younger daughter shows little inclination to engage in the activities in which her sister is more successful than she. However, since such is the attitude of jealousy, creating a subconscious feeling of guilt, one is prone to compensate for it by an outward show of attachment. That is why she flies to the defense of her sister if anyone should say anything disparaging against her.
So number 1, the Rebbe says, don't panic. She's going through an understandable experience. Number 2, so we can tell this girl is obviously disinterested in probably regular activities. He says the reason why she's disinterested is because her older sister is better than her at it. And therefore she says, man, I don't want to do that. That's not for me. And then she compensates for that bad feeling with her sister to be extra connected to her sister and extra, being extra, standing in defense of her sister more. So that is what the Rebbe says so far. Now let's continue.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about.
At the same time, this diagnosis suggests also the method of therapy, namely, that every effort should be made to restore her confidence by offering her opportunities to engage in such activities where she can take a leading part and excel herself. Needless to say, this should be done in a gradual way, for in her present state of mind, she would be reluctant to Surely, both at school and in other cultural circles, there are opportunities for her to develop her artistic and other talents. It would be psychologically beneficial to her if the activities would be of a kind in which her sister does not participate. The course of such activities is fairly wide, and they could be cultural, charitable, or youth work among Jewish youth and the like.
So here the Rebbe says, try and don't focus on her problem that she has on areas which touch her sister. Try and find her new things that she could grow in that would be her expertise, would be her giving back. And, use her school, her family, whatever it is, to try and find something meaningful for her to grow in. And automatically, instead of facing and saying, hey, you have to do this or get better at this or understand that you're not as good as your sister, but you still have a responsibility to do this. Instead of speaking about that directly, try and not make a big deal about that and just move her to something else that she can grow in. So that is another piece of advice, and we'll start stringing these together soon. All right, so now let's get to second part, where we're going to try and understand the background, the philosophical approach of the Rebbe. So until now, what we saw is the Rebbe says, don't focus on the problem. Don't make problems bigger than they are. Don't focus on the problem. There's a number of interesting videos of people walking by the Rebbe. There's one actually, mother and father, and they're telling the Rebbe, our child has issues and he's having a really hard time. So the Rebbe says, does he have friends? And they said yes. And does he play with his friends? And they said yes. How old is he? 8 years old. He said, oh, don't worry about it. It'll pass. Just make sure he's happy, playing with his friends. Because sometimes when you focus on an issue, even by fighting against it, it only makes the issue bigger. And so that's something which we see in what the Rebbe has guided these people. Now we are going to talk about the Torah basis of this, because obviously the Rebbe's guide was always the Torah, and why it works, and we'll give some psychological insight to it. So with that, we're going to go to text number 3 on page 98. Yes.
It is difficult to offer counsel from afar, as the conditions of the country, the family, and so on have a direct bearing on the situation. Those who observe a situation from close proximity are better and more expertly equipped to arrive at an effective treatment. However, since you have already written to me, and everything is by divine providence, I wish to emphasize something that I have witnessed in the majority of similar cases. A decisive and extremely effective method, which to my amazement is not used, at least not as much as it should be used, is Hesach blah blah blah.
Hesach Hadat.
Okay.
Keywords.
Hesach Hadat. Guiding the patient to entirely remove their mind from actively dwelling on the problematic issue at hand. The more the patient succeeds in ceasing to think about and dwell on those issues that are the cause of their problems, the greater will be the ability of their natural internal healing powers, along with their other positive and curative aspects to function, which increased intensity and bring about healing. The above may be accomplished through arranging that these individuals are preoccupied with activities that lead to personal fulfillment, such as doing someone else a favor, something that in any case is acceptable to all, and therefore should not be difficult to convince them to do. This is particularly so nowadays when instability is so prevalent and individual needs are so numerous. It is relatively simple to find a way for these individuals to help others with activities that are consonant with the needs and nature of the locale and of the individual who requires healing.
So here the Rebbe introduces the word Hesach Hadat. Everyone would say it. Hesach Hadat. Now it's actually a really important loaded statement. Dat is a famous word. Now Chabad actually stands for Chachma Bina Dat. Chabad actually takes a lot of meditation and intellectual approaches in transforming oneself. Now Dat is a power in the mind, a very strong power. In Hebrew, Dat means to know, but it also means to connect. It means to fully concentrate on something. It's like, sometimes you know something very deeply and thoroughly. There's certain things you just know deeply and thoroughly. You always, it's always amazing, you have like certain kids who have like certain learning disabilities, and then like you'll be like, what was the batting average of, 2 years ago? I'd be like, oh, 0.964, and he'll know how many touchdowns did whatever get in that year. Oh, so dot means to be fully concentrated, fully focusing on something. So here the Rebbe says something really important. So when your dot, when your power to connect and power to concentrate focuses on something negative, it takes over. And what happens is your power of goodness, and this is something which the Rebbe believes that everyone is actually inherently healed and good inside. And we'll talk about it more. The Rebbe is taking into context that we all have a soul, which is perfectly fine and always healthy, and it's godly, and only once our soul comes into our body does get messed up, and we'll talk about that a little bit more soon. So things get really messed up, and you start thinking about how messed up things are. What that does is it blocks the power of your healthy part, the power of positivity that you have inside you. So the Rebbe says sometimes just focus on something else, and he says to this person, he says, I can't talk about the individual case because it's such a specific business. And the Rebbe encouraged many people to go to therapists, as we'll see. But he said, I just want to mention that this is a very, very powerful thing that we can have. We can give our health, our innate healthy side to us, a chance to go and heal us. So this takes a lot of faith. A lot of us might feel, some people are just very, very negative. What about negative Nancy, right? Some people are just very, very negative. But when you go and you focus your concentration on something which is not negative, that can unleash your healing power. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. This is in different verses of the Torah. And we'll go to text number 4.
I fail to see any grounds for your dejection and for your statement that everything has suddenly fallen apart. Since your anxiety is unfounded, it will not last long. Started today and gone tomorrow. That is provided you do not actively invite morose thoughts that run contrary to human nature and the dictates of our Torah of life, which requires from each of us to serve God specifically with joy. In truth, this service is possible and necessary at each moment of mortal life. You surely recognize, backed also with personal experience, the verily observable reality that if it is sometimes difficult to battle a certain mood, the best advice is to distract your attention from the mood, not by fighting it, but by focusing your thoughts elsewhere. The general model for this approach is God made humans straightforward, but they sought many complications. Since the complications come from they, therefore they have the ability to nullify them easily. I will conclude with my advice, since you sought my counsel. Completely divert your mind from all introspective, self-examining thoughts. Proceed with confidence along your life's path, since God's providence accompanies each of us at each step of our lives, not only regarding matters that we consider highly important, but in every detail of our lives.
So as we said here, we said that God creates everybody perfect, and we sometimes birth and life messes it up. But we have the abilities, just to review all that. So what is the Torah's basis for the Rebbe's approach? And what is the logical basis? So divine inner health is at the core of every being. That's an important value in Judaism. If you're not aware of the Torah, you might not be aware of that. Engaging the mind in a healthy place brings that to the forefront. So a lot of times when we're thinking about the problem, we're thinking about negativity, we actually block that out. Now, Hesed Hadat, I just want to mention that idea of being able to focus, does not mean that you say, hey, let me study the subject of what's bothering me in Torah, right? It's Torah, it's holy. Let me study the subject. It means think about something totally non-related. Connect yourself to something totally non-related, and let the issue kind of shrink. And you say, oh, I'm going to deal with it later. Another thing is it doesn't mean to ignore the problem. It means to remember to approach the problem. I mentioned in the beginning that there are a lot of crossovers. Now, a lot of us are from and born after kind of a workaholic generation. People working really, really hard. And it's known, you got a lot of people, they might retire, and suddenly they're like, oh my God, my heart is killing. What's going on here? And all their emotions of everything they had been pushing down come up. And so the Rebbe is not saying to ignore not have awareness of yourself. He's saying, don't let the feelings dominate. Don't let them dominate. Keep doing positive things. There are several examples that I can think of, but I actually know somebody who had very bad postpartum after they had a baby, to the extent where they said you can't be with your baby because they were having such negative thoughts. And somebody, there are a lot of therapists who actually work in this with these ideas of the Rebbe. They said, okay, every Thursday night, you're going to prepare supper for another family whose mother was sick. And you're just going to prepare supper. And she knew the whole week, she's depressed, she's miserable, but Thursday, I'm going to make supper. And sometimes all she did was call a pizza place and have them deliver pizza. But that actually brought her back to healing. That actually brought her, and she was able to do something positive. She had something she was doing the whole week. She was thinking about and excited for the whole week. So these are some examples. So when we engage in the mind in a healthy place, it brings that to the forefront. God's providence accompanies each of us in every detail of their lives. So this is something that the Rebbe added, that in addition to just changing the subject, it's important to also try and do positive and have fulfillment. Know that you're a good person, doing good things, helping people, and you're not only taking care of yourself. So with that, we're going to go to lesson 3. Lesson 3 is actually kind of a legendary psychologist from Israel, and he, I'm not sure if he's still alive, but he wrote a lot of different manuals which were used all around the world, and he's going to talk about his relationship with the Rebbe.
Professor Ruvain Feuerstein is a world-renowned Israeli clinical and developmental cognitive psychologist, founder and director of the International Center for the Enhancement of Learning Potential. His applied systems are being implemented in over 80 countries across the globe.
The rabbi referred to each children for their problems of development, some epileptic children, some Down syndrome children, and wherever I came, and wherever I visited or I worked in my field, people were addressing themselves to me. The rabbi wants you to see our child. And some of them received really letters from the rabbi, or the word from the rabbi, that I should see their child. And one of the things, and I must say, they believe that such a thing is possible, that people with genetic disorders, chromosomal disorders, can be turned into high functioning, normal functioning, and very close to study, to Yiddishkeit, etc. I heard it very much from the rabbi. It was a daring thing, because at this time, people didn't believe it's possible. One particular case, which I cannot disclose, therefore, it came from a country in Europe. This boy was considered to be mentally defective. One didn't believe that he will ever be able to function and to be independent and to be. This man, the father, in some way was not a very religious person, came to the rabbi. The rabbi told them to bring his son to me. The son came here and was placed in a family. He learned to read. He was sitting here near this door on a chair with the Tehillim. The rabbi said to finish Tehillim each week. And he learned this. It was the third year that he was done. He learned this. And Baruch Hashem, this went very well, and we were already feeling that we had done what the rabbi told us to do and empowered us to do, and we had fulfilled. Then 6 happened, and this young man became in great danger. Not only drugs, but things which I cannot tell you. He ran away and he came into a place from where very few people came out. And I then addressed the Western Rabbi. The Rabbi said, don't leave enough your hand. Continue. And he gave me a suggestion to send somebody to take him out of this place. I have never believed in any possible. But the Rabbi said, I've sent somebody who took out this young man from this terrible, promiscuous drug people. It's all, there's no Aberah Ba'olam. He must not involve this. Came back. I want you to know, he is now the father of 4 children. Many of them, 2 of them, learn in the yeshiva. And they are the only children of this family, only grandchildren of this family, which the grandparents can be proud of. I as a psychologist, and if one says a good psychologist, could never believe that with my own knowledge and my own psychology, I would have ever been able to do it. Usually, in such cases, we raise our hands, nothing to do. Not with the Rabbi. I must tell you something. Psychology, as it is taught, is very limited. Our understanding of the other is very much affected and related to our understanding of ourselves. In the way the Rabbi understood the condition of the individual, the way he claimed and suggested and felt the power to say, yes, do it. There was a very different way of seeing human beings. Not as a just reflection of yourself, but as something which comes Ha'ara Lela.
So before we go on to Dr. Viktor Frankl, see some actually interesting ideas. I just want to summarize. So it's really important that when someone has an emotional problem or someone has invasive thoughts, to do what's called hesach hadat. Hesach hadat means to concentrate on something totally unrelated. At the same time, it's also important to know that the system works because you have a soul inside. And the sickness is just a small part of you. It actually is a small part of you. Your mission and your soul is much greater than the problem which is stopping you. So when you know those two things, then when you can take focus off of the problem, you can unleash the goodness of your soul, and it can actually help heal. We're going to go on now. So Dr. Viktor Frankl, just to those of you who haven't heard of him, but who hasn't heard of him, right? Then from 1905 to 1997, he was a Holocaust survivor in concentration camps for 3 years. Long story short, in the Holocaust, until the Holocaust, he had followed a theory of Freud, which we'll allude to. But in the concentration camps, he happened to see that there were a lot of religious people who were surviving, had better survival. And he realized, because a lot of them felt that they always had a purpose, no matter what. He ended up losing his family, his wife, his pregnant wife, and his mother and father. One of his sisters, I believe, survived. But he learned from there, and he said, wow, he invented what's called logotherapy. Now, I would introduce it. The Rebbe spoke about it many times, but I think Viktor Frankl himself will do a better job introducing it. So text 5. Page 1 and 2. Is that Sandy?
Oh, my turn? Oh. Logotherapy. I am reminded of up in my office in Vienna and asked me, what school do you stand for? I answered, it's my own theory. It's called logotherapy. Can you tell me in one sentence what is meant by logotherapy, he asked? At least, what is the difference between psychoanalysis and logotherapy? Yes, I said, but in the first place, can you tell me in one sentence what you think the essence of psychoanalysis is? This was his answer. During psychoanalysis, the patient must lie down on a couch and tell you things which sometimes are very disagreeable to tell. Whereupon I immediately retorted with the following improvisation. Now in logotherapy, the patient may remain sitting erect, but he must hear things which sometimes are very disagreeable to hear. Of course, this was meant facetiously and not as a capsule version of logotherapy. However, there is something in it, inasmuch as logotherapy, in comparison with psychoanalysis, is a method less retrospective and less introspective. Logotherapy focuses rather on the future, that is to say, on the meanings to be fulfilled by the patient in his future. Logotherapy, indeed, is a meaning-centered psychotherapy. At the same time, logotherapy defocuses on the vicious circle formations and feedback mechanisms which play such a great role in the development of neurosis. Thus, the typical self-centeredness of the neurotic is broken up instead of being continually fostered and reinforced.
So as we see, we spoke about the Rebbe's guidance. The Rebbe's guidance was based on not making a big deal about the problem and focusing on doing good and focusing on being a good person and doing more. It's obvious you can see the similarities here. The Rebbe, Viktor Frankl, basically, in other words, said that when we are focusing on what meaning we can give to the world, that is the ultimate purpose of, that's the way humans are programmed, and that brings the healing. To summarize, this is a brief biography, 1905-97, Holocaust survivor, author of the best-selling Man Search for Meaning. Anyone here read it? All right, pretty popular. Founder of logotherapy. So, Frankl believed that a sense of meaning enables people to overcome painful experiences. You know, you see this a lot by parents with their children. And that was, now, obviously, we can see that the Rebbe and him seemed to be very in line. However, there's actually a fascinating story about how much they were in line. We're going to watch a video in a moment. Just want to tell you about it. There was a rabbi named Rabbi Yaakov Biederman, is the Chabad rabbi of Vienna. Like I'm the rabbi in Prescott, he's the rabbi in Vienna. He moved there in the early 80s. Anyways, Viktor Frankl wasn't really associated with the Jewish community there, but every year he would send a donation to the Chabad. Every year at the Rosh Hashanah time, he would send a donation. And he was always wondering why this famous doctor, who's not involved in Judaism, always seems to send a donation. So here's the story.
Rabbi Yaakov Biederman is the director of Chabad Lubavitch in Austria. Shortly after he arrived in Vienna in 1981, he began to receive annual contributions from Dr. Viktor Frankl, the pioneering psychiatrist and founder of logotherapy.
התעלומה הזו, שפרופסור פרנקל מצא לנכון לתרום דווקא לחב"ד, לארגון דתי, לארגון שעוסק בהפצת היהדות, למרות שהוא עצמו בשום צורה לא הזדהה כאדם ששייך, נפטרה לנו הרבה שנים אחר כך. רק בשנת תשנ"ה. איש ביטחון מודיע לי שישנה אישה מבוגרת שמעוניינת לפגוש אותי, ואני אמרתי לו שיכניס אותה. והיא התחילה במילים האלו, היא אמרה לי, קוראים לי מרגרטה חייס. אם אתה חושב שאתם השלוחים הראשונים של הרבי לאוסטריה, יש לי בשבילך הפתעה. אני הייתי השליחה הראשונה של הרבי לאוסטריה. הייתי די המום. והיא ממשיכה לספר. היא קיבלה הזמנה פגישה ויחידות עם הרבי. ובאותה הזדמנות אני סיפרתי לרבי שמפעם לפעם אני חוזרת לאוסטריה, ובסיום אותו מפגש, באותה יחידות, הרבי ביקש ממנה שבפעם הבאה שהיא נוסעת לאוסטריה, הוא היה רוצה שהיא תיצור קשר עם המזכירות של הרבי. הוא רוצה לבקש ממנה שתמלא משימה מסוימת. רק כמה חודשים אחר כך התכוננתי לחזור לאוסטריה. אמרו לי בשמו של הרבי שכשאני מגיעה לווינאי, שאני אצור קשר עם פרופסור ויקטור פרנקל, ושאמסור לו בשם הרבי שלא יתייאש ושלא יבוש מפני המנהיגים, ושימשיך בדרכו וימשיך בהפצת משנתו, שיתחזק, והרבי מברך אותו שהשם יצליחו והוא יזכה לפריצת דרך. דוקטור ויקטור פרנקל היה פסיכיאטר עמית של זיגמונד פרויד לפני השואה בווינה. אחרי שהוא היה במחנות ריכוז וחווה מצבים יוצאי דופן, הגיע למסקנה הפוכה. הוא אמר, האדם ביסודו הוא מחפש תכלית ותוכן לחייו, ולכן הוא האמין שרפואת הנפש מאוד קשורה יותר עם הענקת תוכן ואמונה, ערכים לבן אדם. הוא עמד בראש מרפאה חשובה, והוא גם היה מרצה באוניברסיטה, והשתתפו רבים בהרצאותיו, אבל יחד עם זאת, הוא היה מושא ללעג ולקלס, כי האסכולה הפסיכואנליטית של פרויד שלטה בכיפה, והיו מפריעים לו אפילו באמצע הרצאות. הוא היה עד כדי כך פגוע שהוא באותם ימים, כשמרגרטה חייס חיפשה אותו במרפאה, אמרו לה שהוא כבר תקופה לא הופיע. היא הגיעה אליו הביתה. נקשה בדלת ללא כל הודעה, ולא היה לה אפשרות להודיע לפני כן. והיא תיארה שכשהיא נכנסת לבית, כשהיא פותחת את הדלת, פותחת לה אישה שלא נראית יהודיה. היא יכלה אפילו להבחין שהיה תלוי אצלה בתוך הבית. היא הייתה בטוחה שזה מאוד מוזר שהרבי שולח אותה לעודד מישהו שגר בבית כזה. אבל בכל אופן היא עזרה אומץ ושאלה אם אפשר לראות בבקשה את דוקטור פרנקל, ואז הוא הופיע בפתח הבית, והוא שאל אותה מה הגברת רוצה, והיא ענתה לו שיש בשבילו מסר מרבי שניארסון מברוקלין, ניו יורק. ואז היא אומרת לו, הרב שניארסון ביקש ממני למסור לך שלא תתייאש, שתתחזק, אל תבוש בפני אלו שמלהיגים, סופך להצליח ותזכה לפריצת דרך אלו, זה היה תוכן הדברים שהיא מצאה לו. היא אומרת, ההתרגשות שלו הייתה משהו שהיא מעולם לא חוותה אצל אדם מבוגר, או אצל אישיות כזו. הוא פשוט פרץ בבכי תמרורים. ואחר כך לקח לו זמן עד שהוא יכל לדבר, והוא הראה לניירות שהיו לו על השולחן. אלו היו ניירות תפסי הגירה לאוסטרליה. הוא היה כל כך מדוכא מהיחס אליו, שהוא החליט לעזוב את וינה. ועכשיו, כשהוא קיבל את המסר הזה ממנה, המסר שהרבי העביר אליו, הוא אמר לה, אני אתחזק, אני חוזר לעבודה ואני אמשיך. הוא התחיל בצורה מאוד בטוחה להטיף את משנתו. הספר שלו, האדם מחפש משמעות, Man's Search for Meaning, תורגם ליותר מ-12 שפות. הספר הופץ בלמעלה מ10 מיליון עותקים. אני רציתי לאשש את הסיפור הזה. אחרי שהיא סיפרה לי את זה, אני ביקשתי להתקבל לפגישה אצל פרופסור פרנקל. הוא כבר אז היה די מבוגר, למעלה מגיל 90, אני התקשרתי אליו ושאלתי אם אוכל להתקבל אליו לפגישה. הוא אישית ענה בטלפון בבית, הוא אמר לי שהוא חלש מדי, הוא לא יכול להיפגש, הוא גם היה קצת קצר רוח, הוא לא היה במיטבו. אז בכל זאת, בטלפון שאלתי אותו, אם השם, הרבי מלובביץ', הרב שניאורסון, אומר לו משהו, רציתי פשוט לבדוק את הנתונים, גם איתו אישית. ברגע שהוא שמע את שמו של הרבי, אז נימת הכל השתנתה לגמרי. הוא פתאום נהיה מאוד סבלני. הוא אמר, ודאי ששמו של הרבי מלובביץ' אומר לי הרבה. אני חייב לו המון. Ich schulde ihm sehr viel, הוא אמר לי בגרמנית. הוא הוסיף ואמר, ich schätze den Rabbi sehr. hat mich in einen sehr kritischen Moment geholfen. ברגע מאוד קריטי הוא עזר לי. אני חייב לו רבות.
He also put the film on for many of his years. It's interesting to note the Rebbe viewed that Professor Viktor Frankl, as the Rebbe viewed many ideas in Judaism, as we get closer to the coming of Mashiach, will start becoming more apparent in the regular science. And the Rebbe viewed Viktor Frankl as the conduit of the Jewish ideas that we studied earlier today that would go and introduce them into the realm, into the medical realm. So we'll go on, and here's another, with this background, we'll read another message from the professor. Text 6.
I consider it a dangerous misconception of mental hygiene to assume that man needs, in the first place, an equilibrium, or what is called in biology, homeostasis, a tensionless state. What man actually is needed, not a tensionless state, but rather the striving and struggling for a worthwhile goal, a clearly chosen task. What he needs is not this charge of tension at any cost, but a call with potential meaning waiting to be fulfilled by him. And one should not think that this holds true only for normal conditions and neurotic individuals, but is even more valid. If architects want to strengthen a decrepit arch, they increase the load which is laid upon it, for thereby the parts are joined more firmly together. So if therapists want to foster the patient's mental health, then they should not be afraid to create a sound amount of tension through a reorientation for the meaning of one's life.
So here, again, it's not hard to see how the Rebbe's ideas are very, very similar to Professor Viktor Frankl's. Again, a person always needs to know that he has to be productive and go and have meaning and do good things. Now, we'll see, actually this is interesting, this is to Dr. Charlotte Stern-Merz, a Haifa-based mental health professional. This is text 7. Text 7.
I took particular interest in the writing of Dr. Frankl from Hannah in this matter. To my surprise, however, his approach has apparently not been appropriately disseminated, nor has it become properly accepted. Although one can find numerous reasons as to why his ideas are not widely accepted, the question as to why is it not appreciated still remains.
So just to sum up, okay, so we mentioned at the beginning of the class, what does it mean mentally healthy, emotionally healthy? So this is just to add to what everybody said. The idea is that humans are healthy inside. We have a soul, our soul is healthy, and whatever gets in, and our soul wants to accomplish and do good things in the world. And they're part and parcel with, what we call homeostasis. I mean, a lot of times when people are suffering, they just want to feel good. However, we always have to remember that besides feeling good, there has to be a reason why we need to feel good. Where are we going to direct our energy? Our good energy, where are we going to direct our energy? And that's ultimately when we feel fulfilled and we feel the most balanced. So in conclusion, we're going to just do a little bit more. This is a letter of a lady who wrote to the Rebbe about her dejection and just generally having a pessimistic feeling of feeling incompetent. And it seems that she felt she was living a non-productive lifestyle. Want to read text 8a.
Understandably, I do not agree at all with your foundations upon which you construct your perspective and conclusions. By this I mean that I believe they are not grounded in reality. Your current state of mind is only temporary, and the more effort you put in, the quicker it will change. For it is absolutely clear that you have the power and also the talent to be of benefit, not only to yourself, but to others as well. It is only that, like all things in this world, it is necessary to reveal and develop potential into reality, which almost always takes effort. However, this is a degree of effort that is eminently attainable. When one considers that their relatively brief efforts will benefit themselves and others for many years to come, and it will improve their and their community's welfare, spiritually, materially, or both, and that these improvements will likely have a ripple effect and reach even further, then one will easily appreciate that their efforts and exertions to achieve this end are well worthwhile.
So point number one. This is a very interesting letter, and it kind of summarizes different things we learned today. Number one is we have souls. So the Rebbe totally rejects the idea of having a negative self-view, and the Rebbe says, that's just your feelings right now. I was listening to this podcast where there was this rabbi who was actually kind of talking about his struggles. So he talked about how it was one Shabbos, and it was quiet summer Shabbos, and it was really kind of quiet day, he wasn't doing much in the afternoon. And he decided he's going to commit suicide. Anyways, he's sitting there and he's struggling with himself. And he says to himself, you know what? Shabbos is God's holy day. I'm going to wait till after Shabbos. Anyways, you're not allowed to, right? But Shabbos is God's holy day. I'm going to wait till after Shabbos. Anyways, Shabbos comes, ends, and he says, hey, I actually don't want to commit suicide anymore. So he said in his talk, he said, and this is something that I feel like I've passed on to a bunch of people, feelings pass. Feelings pass. Sometimes you feel like really bad about something, something's really urgent, but that feeling will pass. And then but even it's objectively urgent. Well, that feeling will also pass. So the Rebbe says, this that you feel negative about yourself, well, that's a feeling and it'll pass, you know? And it's not true. People are positive. We have missions in the world. Furthermore, the Rebbe says, he says, every person, actually, if you read carefully, every person has the ability to contribute, to do good things. And not only that, but your contribution is not only for you, it's for the whole world, it's for other people in your community, your family, your friends. And this is just the way we're programmed. We're programmed with the ability to contribute and the ability to help and do good things. So the Rebbe tells her, don't give up, and that's what you need to invest in. We'll continue with this letter on text 8b. Slow and steady.
Without a doubt, in the vast majority of instances, it is impossible to radically change one's frame of mind instantaneously. However, this is not what is required. It will suffice that upon receiving my letter, you will resolve to move in the right direction, to begin leading a productive life. Start by taking the first step in this direction, and then step by step, and in the cumulative progression, you will soon find yourself on the road to life that brings you self-contentment and satisfaction. If you wish to heed my advice, continue your studies next year. But in addition to studying, you should also involve yourself in providing education. It would be best to do so several times a week. My intent is that you organize groups of children to be your counselor, or even teach them subjects that can be understood on their level, holding Shabbat and festival get-togethers for them, and similar initiatives.
So here, there's two more points. Number one is all these ideas are all the process. There's a lot of times when we're hurting, and we say like, oh my God, I need to do something now. But it's like, you go to the emergency room, you gotta wait 8 hours. That's just the way life is. Sometimes we go, we have negative thoughts, and we try and think about something else, and it's a battle, and we do okay, right? But we have to remember that inside, we have inherent good, and it's a process. Little by little, you get stronger and stronger. Here the Rebbe says, it's a process. This has to be the direction you need to go. You know, they say a story about these three psychologists who were having a beer together. So they said, what's your deepest secret? So the first guy says, well, I'll tell you the truth. Every time I have a client sitting on the couch, I always think to myself, I always imagine myself different ways of killing him. The second one says, well, you know, I'll tell you my deepest secret. I have cheated so many clients. I have cheated them financially in such terrible ways. Finally, the third one comes and says, I'll tell you my deepest secret. No matter what, I can't keep a secret. So I think one thing that you can take about these ideas is a lot of times when someone does go to a psychologist, it's important to know the general direction where we're heading. What is the purpose where we're heading? You know, there are people who sometimes they know the subject really well, they know how to dissect the body, but they don't want to heal it, or they don't necessarily know how to heal it. They don't necessarily know a proper way.
What about, isn't there also a catalyst sometimes needed? I mean, you know what the right thing to do, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
No, so
like if the Rebbe told me to do something, it would
so we said last week we have a mitzvah to go to doctors, but there were several letters that I saw when I was researching this where the Rebbe kind of said, like, it's also important to decide which direction you're going based on, you know, sometimes people have different religions, different views. So, you know, just from personal experience, so a lot of times there are people who have maybe a traumatic experience and they're totally in denial of it. And then they'll go and someone will help them uncover that. And they'll feel like they're healed. They'll feel so much better. And they'll feel like that's the healing. And like they're healed, they're better. But as time goes on, they realize there has to be something more of a direction. So yes, we definitely need to go to doctors, and definitely people can help with this process. But a lot of times what the Rebbe is doing is he's trying to set what is the direction, if we would dissect our body and our soul, what is the direction that humans need to go in? It's not always about just feeling good, or even feeling good in the moment. You know, Mark's he's something in recovery for many years, and I'm sure you can tell me that, like, you know, a lot of times in the long-term realm of it, you see a whole different picture than the short term. So now, the next thing the Rebbe says is he says, the road to leading a productive life is gradual, and he says, I think you should stay in school, but he tells her, he says, you know, don't wait to do good things after you get your degree. Start something small now. It might be something really, really small. You know, and there are many stories out there in different case studies of people literally doing like the smallest things. As we mentioned last week, literally doing the smallest things just to be on the giving side. I remember reading one of the Holocaust biographies I read. There was a guy who survived the Holocaust. And they said, what was your secret to survival? So he said, you know, I realized, he was a doctor actually. He said, I realized that a human needs a certain amount of calories every day. And they gave us 500 less calories. I don't know the numbers. Anyone know? 2,000 calories? They gave us 1,500 calories.
I think it was like 800, I read someplace.
Whatever is the amount, they gave us less. So he said, every day I would take what I had, which was less, and I would give part of it to someone else. He said, they were trying to make me feel not human. They were saying, you guys are worse than humans. You're getting less food than humans need. He said, I decided I'm going to remain human by being a giver. And I'm going to fight it back. And he said, that's how he survived. Even though he was consuming less, it actually helped in his survival. So now we'll continue on the letter. So yeah, absolutely right. I mean, we can see that the Rebbe actually sent many people to Dr. Feuerstein and to all sorts of therapists and psychologists. I mean, in the religious community, there's tons of them. But what the Rebbe is generally trying to do here is which direction someone wants to go, which direction you want to go. So now we're going to go and we're going to continue text 8c.
Should I do it?
Yes, yes.
Consider well, there is so much to accomplish in our world, and each human carries so much potential. Due to the vast amount of work that needs to be done, we cannot afford to give up on even one capability or talent. It is therefore the mission of every single person to harness all the potentials and talents they possess to improve their part of the world. The beginning, like with everything else, starts with learning the profession, acquiring the necessary knowledge in general, and especially the knowledge necessary for using the individual's unique talents. I hope that after you can contemplate the above a couple of times, you will immediately begin being active, and you will not be fazed by the effort that is required. You will then be able to soon witness the fruits of your labors.
So here the Rebbe talks about how really everything we have can be used for purpose, can be used for meaning, and used to serve the greater cause. So just to summarize the keys that we said today, number one is when you're in a really bad place, sometimes a state of panic, direct your energy and attention to finding meaning and purpose. I don't know, I was thinking about it today that so many people nowadays take out social media and it right away shuts them off. I actually remember when I was a kid, I don't know if you guys remember, this was before smartphones. We just had regular cell phones. And I remember an aunt passed away and it was really, really sad. And I remember I took my phone out and I don't remember I went to a game or picture or something. I'm like, whoa, there goes the feelings, they're gone, right? Now, it's so important to note that when you divert your attention, you still have to go back there at some point. So the Rebbe's not saying, push it away and keep doing more, become a workaholic, keep doing good things. Make an appointment and you'll get back there. As the Rebbe told somebody, he said, wait till you feel you can objectively approach whatever's bothering you. Because if you don't, it probably won't go away. And, it's part of your mission to help yourself as well and to bring God and faith to that space inside of you. Direct your attention. I guess they don't have all the summary here.
Healthy at heart. 1. A prominent approach to overcoming emotional challenges is to focus on our disturbing thoughts or emotions in an attempt to uncover and express deeper issues that lie at their core. 2. The Rebbe often advocated a contrary approach to emotional wellness. He insisted that emotional challenge can, at times, be overcome by moving the mind away from the issues and engaging it in unrelated, meaningful, and productive activities. 3. The Rebbe viewed the human soul as a divine entity that is emotionally healthy at its core. When disturbing and negative thoughts become the dominant voice in an individual's conscious mind, their healthy core is relegated to the back burner. Through engaging the conscious mind in external, healthy areas, the disturbing thoughts lose their dominance, which permits the core inner health to reemerge and bring healing.
So next week is above adversity. So today we kind of dealt with disturbing thoughts. There's some great letters in here. It was very interesting how the Rebbe dealt with OCD. There are different letters where the Rebbe would say don't make a big deal about it. Do it and don't do it and move on. And try and focus your thoughts on different things. Because sometimes when we focus our thought, it makes the problems bigger. Next week is about when we have really challenging times in life. And it's not because our minds are obsessing over something and racing about it, or we feel really bad about something, but we have really big challenges, whether they be health or financial or family or whatever it is, how to overcome that. The great in the appendix here, there's a lot of great letters and there's tons and tons of great information after. Any questions, comments? Agree, disagree? Anyone want to take out the boxing gloves? No? No? Yeah.
I watched a great video that would help with all this stuff by the Rebbe on YouTube, The Immense Power of Doing. That's just what it's called. If you search The Immense Power of
So that's related actually with the lady dancing. Action. Sometimes when you really can't break the cycle, action helps. I just want to finish off. Actually, if you don't mind, if I can just take a picture. I just want to finish off that one thing that's so important about, I think the Rebbe's guidance to me is that